So I know in episode 1, I kind of had the personality of a wet dish rag, but come on, I mean, I had like 20 different things I wanted to cover. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. I tried doing it unscripted a couple of times, and upon reviewing the takes, I always ended up realizing that I'd missed 1 or 2 points that I wanted to hit. Since it was an introduction episode, I realized I didn't really have a choice but to script it if I wanted to make sure I didn't miss any topics I wanted to cover. So yeah, there will be no more scripted episodes, and from now on, hopefully I'll act a little more natural. So as far as what I've been up to, I finished my 4th Malachyte track towards my new album. You can hear it playing in the background right now, and you can click on the link over there in the description to hear the full song. I've had only a couple mountain unicycle excursions this week, and there were no film or pictures from any of them, so unfortunately I have nothing to show there. Hopefully there'll be another unicycle video in the near future. As far as Guitar Hero, what I've been working on, as you know, I've 5-starred every song on every instrument, including DLC and World Tour. The last one being anything on drums, which was the topic of my first episode, or at least the latter half of my first episode. A couple packs have come out since I recorded the last episode, but there was nothing challenging in any of them. I 5-starred all the songs on all the instruments pretty quickly. If another challenging pack comes out, I'll be sure to talk about it, but so far there's been only easy stuff. Other than that, I worked a little bit at breaking 1,000,000 points on All Nightmare Long on drums. This is the first time I've broken 1,000,000 points without playing co-op before. I've also worked at becoming at least 5th place or better on every DLC song, at least on the 360. For some reason, the hardest one for me was the Travis Barker remix of Low. Either a lot of people play that song, or I just suck at it, but it took me a lot of tries to get within top 5 on that one. Again, there's links to my scores in ScoreHero over there in the description if you want to see the rest of my ranks. Alright, in this episode I'd just like to talk to you a little bit about my musical history, since at least for me the main point of these videos is to get a little more exposure for my music. I'm really hoping that more people can hear and appreciate it as a result of these videos. I was classically trained. I started taking piano lessons at age 5 and violin lessons at age 8, and ended up quitting violin lessons at age 12 and quitting piano lessons a little bit after then. It proved that once I started high school, just homework and all sorts of other social activities seemed to take over my life, and I kind of dropped everything musical for at least a few years. Then when I was about 14 or 15, I think I was about 15, a friend of mine happened across a pirated version of the old software Fruity Loops 3.3, and since he knew I was musically inclined, he gave it to me and said, "Here, mess around with this, see what you can do." And you know, at first it was fun to just click around and try to make some songs and try to learn the application, but after a while I realized that this could truly become a passion of mine, so by the time Fruity Loops 3.3 was upgraded to FL Studio 4, they dropped the horrible name by the end of version 3, thankfully, I decided to go out and purchase a legitimate copy, which, by the way, for those of you who write electronic music, I highly recommend you do. ImageLine, the company that makes FL Studio, offers lifetime free updates, which is something that very few other software vendors do. You know, when a new version comes out, you're forced to spend a couple $100 if you want to stay legitimate and purchase the new version, but I bought FL Studio when it was version 4.0. It's now up to version 8, and I've been receiving updates to version 5, 6, 7, and 8, all for free since I purchased it when it was version 4. So anyway, I purchased it, I started purchasing more plugins for it, I started purchasing a bunch of samples. Anyway, after I felt like I'd learned the software well enough, I decided to try to make a full album. Now, what I feel like is so unique about my background for writing electronic music is that almost everyone out there who writes electronic music obviously got into it because it's a genre they listened to. But before I was exposed to FL Studio, or Fruity Loops as it was back when I was exposed to it, I was into more classical stuff. I listened to some rap and hip-hop, I listened to some rock, I listened to some metal. Basically, I listened to all kinds of things, pretty much everything except electronic music. So for me, it was kind of backwards. I got into writing the music first, and then of course after I started writing it, I started listening to it as well, and by now I have quite an extensive collection of electronic music. But as a result of coming from this weird angle that most electronic music artists didn't come from, my first album was sort of all over the place. There was no concrete understanding of any forms of electronic music, much less trance, which I later learned is kind of what I was going for. So this album, the production is kind of terrible, to be honest with you, but it had a lot of interesting musical ideas, and looking back on it now, I can see that mainly the thing to blame is that I had no experience listening to any electronic music, and my musical background was so varied that my songs tended to sound fairly disjointed. And anyway, as I said, the album's called The Mad Notes, which, for those of you who are curious, back then, when I finished the album, I think I was about 16 or 17, was around the time that Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back came out. And it's towards the beginning of the movie when Jay is singing and the guys coming up to him wanting to buy weed from him say, "What the hell are you singing?" And Jay goes, "Man, you don't know Morse Day and the Time? That shit is the Mad Notes!" So after the release of the Mad Notes, I started working on my second album, which I much later decided was going to be called Nocturne. This album, I started getting more of a grasp on the concept of trance music. I started developing more passion for actually fine-tuning my songs and perfecting them. I was still just having fun writing music, but I cared a lot more about the outcome than I did back when I wrote most of the songs for the Mad Notes. And after I finished Nocturne, I started working on what I was planning to make my third album as Ignite. But after I wrote 4 tracks for it, I ended up realizing that my taste in electronic music was shifting somewhat from more melodic anthem trance type to more underground Goa and Psy-Trance type. So I realized at this point I should probably change my artist name, as well as conclude the Ignite project with just these 4 songs, which got released as the Cryptic Power EP. Now, I should mention that the name Ignite was thought up before I even started working on the Mad Notes, when I had just written a couple songs, screwing around, songs that never made it outside my personal collection, because they're so bad I wouldn't want anybody to hear them. A friend of mine at school said, "Hey, if you're writing music, you should have an artist name." And at the time, when I wasn't taking it seriously, I just screwed around a little. I said, "Yeah, sure, come up with something." And he goes, "How about Ignite?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, sure, that sounds good. I'll just be Ignite." And so my first 2 albums and EP were written under an artist name that I didn't even come up with myself, that doesn't really fit my music. And of course, later I learned there's also a punk band called Ignite, which made searching and categorization very difficult. Actually, to this day, if you search for any of my Ignite releases in iTunes, search for Ignite, they're going to come up mixed in with all of the releases from the punk band Ignite, which is its own mess. So, anyway, after the release of the Cryptic Power EP, I decided to change my name to Malachyte, which I went over briefly in the first episode, but this right here is a piece of malachite. My name is spelled with a Y instead of an I, but it's based off of that rock, or mineral, or stone, or whatever you want to call it. And under this new name, Malachyte, I decided to start writing more Goa and Psy-Trance type tracks, and right now I'm working towards finishing my first Malachyte album. I have 4 songs so far, again, all of which can be heard on my website, which is linked to over there in the description. The first song I wrote as Malachyte was Twisted Forest, which was a sort of a forest Psy/Goa song. A little more melodic than most forest Psy that you hear, but still had the dark and tribal energies of forest Psy. Second song I wrote is called Toad, which is a more down-tempo, foresty type Goa song. Much more simple, much more sort of groovy tribal rhythms again. In that song I really wanted to convey the simple and primal energies of a toad, of course. That's the name of the song. And I wanted to make it less complex than most songs I had made before, because if you think about the life of a toad, most of what they do is based on instinct. They really only have instinct to search for food, eat it, and dig under the dirt when it's too cold to be above the dirt, and seek water when they are thirsty or desire to go swimming. It's a very simple-minded way of thinking, so I wanted to keep the song fairly simple to match the energy of that animal. After that, I decided it was enough with the foresty stuff for now. I wanted to try something different, and I tried writing a more uplifting space Goa type tune, which I named Protostar. And again, as I said at the beginning of this episode, I just finished my 4th Malachyte track, which is called Canopy of Sound, which again, you can hear in the background here, and you can hear the whole thing without my voiceover on my website in the description. Canopy of Sound is my first ambient or down-tempo Malachyte track. This song has a lot more humanistic type melodies and stuff. I actually played the majority of the melodies in this song on my keyboard, and I quantized them and slightly modified them, but it has a lot more human feel to it than some of the more trancey tracks that I've done as Malachyte. So please go to my site, listen to it, see what you think. Alright, well I guess that's it for this time. In the next episode, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the music that has inspired me over the years. I'll briefly go over my electronic music collection and then talk about albums or EPs or CDs which I own, which have been heavily influential for me over the course of my music career. Oh, and by the way, something I've been thinking of doing, I'm not sure if I would make them episodes of their own or just little videos I would do between episodes, but I've been thinking about once I finished a track in FL Studio, sort of walking through my project, going through the different patterns that I created, the different synths that I used, the different automation that I did, and sort of just give a tour of how I put the song together. If there are any FL Studio users out there who would find this interesting, then leave a comment below, and if I get enough requests, I will start doing that as well. So yeah, see you next episode.